Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. We had a little bit of sound issues last week. Is everything okay? I'd love a thumbs up if it's good, or thumbs down if it's bad. Amazing. And you could see everything? All right. And one thing I always love is for people to just in chat say where you're from. We're always in this learning community of culture class interested in sharing, where we are culturally constructed in this particular moment. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Grossman. I have a company and it's called Zeitguide. And Zeitguide means spirit of the times, where Zeitguide is guide to the Zeitgeist, and Zeitgeist is a German word that means spirit of the times. And I've been doing this culture class, which is really what I do for clients on scale for as many people who want to join. And before the coronavirus, like I said, I've been doing it for clients. And since coronavirus, 13 weeks ago, I've been doing it for anybody. I had 11 classes for free, which basically starts with my Zeitguiding, which I'm going to show you. And then I have a Zeitguest expert who appears in my Hearts and Minds segment, which is where I connect with somebody to actually just tell us what's in their heart and what's in their mind. So this week, so this is Zeitguide Culture Class, you got it. We launched the summer semester last week. And I had actually Shepard Ferry, who was planned, who talked about some of his artistic images that depicted police brutality, as well as racism and unrest throughout the years of his work. He also did the Obama Hope poster, if you didn't know. We also had Calvin Baker on last week's culture class, and he just wrote a book that's going to be out in basically 3 weeks. And it's called A More Perfect Reunion. I advised him that he should make this a little bit bigger so we could see it, which is about race, integration, and the future of America. So if you missed it, you could see it on our website, zeitguide.com/culture class, and or on our YouTube channel. And it was very illuminating. It happened last week. The first week, or actually the second week of right after George Floyd's death and the protests, and it was illuminating to see from the both of them. And this week we have Cindy Gallop, and I call her a cultural revolutionary. She's done so much work by what she calls blowing shit up in the advertising business, where she basically had her tenure in, and now in all corporations. And she was actually booked since the beginning of time when I decided to start this summer semester. But we spoke last week, and she felt that it's really important to talk about racism and how to think about it within the context of the corporate world. So we're going to get to Cindy. Cindy, I know you're there, so thank you so much for being here. And before we do anything, I'm just going to be doing my Zeitguiding. And my Zeitguiding is guiding you through the Zeitgeist and our constantly changing culture. And when I look at the world of ideas, I bucketize them in 4 main themes, like all the things that are being talked about in terms of global and societal trends. How is technology impacting consumers and society? What is happening to consumers and everything from media, advertising, retail, anything that's consumer facing on a global level, and then workplace trends. And I kind of find the connective tissue through all of those. And the theme of this week, I would say, is the call to action. I'm going to talk more about that. And when I talk about what's happening in the global in my beginning lecture is that I've been talking about since I do a digest, a cultural almanac every year. And I did this for this year. And basically, I've been talking about whether the CEO has become political or non-political. I've called it the political CEO. In fact, in the beginning of 2019, CEOs were basically, by the Edelman Trust Barometer, 76 people that were polled were looking for their CEOs to address change. And 75% of them trusted their employer to take the right action. And this was a year ago. Actually, no, sorry, a year and a half ago. And now I'm seeing this conversation come to the forefront. Now, the reason why a year ago, or the beginning of at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, I said that it might not be the not so political CEO, is because basically they were fighting about, such issues as intolerance. Bob Iger, the CEO of Walt Disney, made a very poignant speech about how social media has been, and Twitter has been impetus, a catalyst for hate in the world. And that conversation is happening right now. And they talked about climate change, and stores stopped selling guns. And the movie business didn't shoot in Georgia anymore because of their desire to reverse abortion laws. So then that kind of shifted when the Hong Kong protests were happening. And the CEO basically stepped back in many ways, like Tim Cook in Apple. And I think, and by the way, if everybody could put yourself on mute, and Sherry, who's my amazing assistant, if you could just monitor that, that would be amazing. So anyway, that theme of the CEO being corporate leader is being talked about. This is basically the article that was written literally this past week in the New York Times, talking about CEOs and how they should respond to this issue of racism and what to do about it. And if many of you who are working for companies, I know that you are talking a lot about the current situation and what does it mean. But this continues the narrative of what Jamie Dimons, the head of Roundtable, he was this Business Roundtable, he was the CEO of JP Morgan Chase and the leader of the Business Roundtable. And they basically said at this point that CEOs need to create culture change for society's benefit, and we have to appeal to the stakeholders as opposed to the shareholders. And this is obviously happening again so many times in terms of the conversation. So that's what's happening on the global conversation right now. We'll get more to like what's happening in work as I go there. But that's what I've been thinking about. What is the CEO's role? And I'm sure Cindy, and I know Cindy is going to tell us what her point of view is, what CEOs as the global political leader and stakeholder, or somebody who's appealing to their stakeholders, what they should do. One other thing in the global section I just thought was important, because I want to connect what's been happening with COVID in the last 13 weeks, and it still exists, by the way, and what's happening with the post George Floyd's death and the protests, and now the conversations about systemic racism. And basically, this poll, which is from the Pew Research Center, I believe a highly regarded source, basically said that Black US adults are following more COVID stories more closely than anybody else in these particular, if you could see my cursor, these particular issues. And I actually have asked a couple of my Black friends and why this is so, because there are, the inequality issue, the disparity issue that we've been talking about, the education issue that we've been talking about, or people have been talking about, but also there's a higher risk in Black and brown people, or more Black people, of getting heart disease as well as diabetes. So this whole health issue is really coming to this conversation as well. Let's jump into technology, where I'm saying that big tech defines itself. Axios had a great piece about Twitter really redefining themselves, and they just have the most downloads, ever since the protests. And basically Twitter, which has not been doing so well in terms of advertising income or revenue compared to like Facebook and all the other social media platforms, but they really have come and defined themselves as what they have always been: a utility, a megaphone, for all of us to speak our voices, right? So Twitter is basically getting this, although there's a lot of misinformation, and Jack Dorsey and the rest of the company are really speaking out against this, but they were obviously the first people to put a label on Trump's tweet of the looting and the shooting. Whereas Mark Zuckerberg, on the other hand, was not part of the same initiative. In fact, Nick Bilton from Vanity Fair said that Facebook has become the social media home of the right. You know, we saw Jack Dorsey, who started to label Trump's quote, and Evan Spiegel even said that he would no longer reflect or promote Trump's posts on the platform of Snapchat. And Kevin Roose of the New York Times actually talked about the list of the top 10 posts shared on Facebook in the last 24 hours. And look what he tweeted. All of these right-wing, maybe not CNN, but these are the people, and not the AARP, but a majority of them are more right-wing, and that's why Nick Bilton wrote that piece. And just today, advertisers are actually pulling out and saying, time out, Facebook. We don't believe that you're a company that is impacting the change that we need to have. In fact, you're accelerating the disgust. So moving forward on that. But there is one thing, because I know Cindy loves to call, you know, companies out. There was this piece on The Verge that basically said there are some good tech companies that have been making some good statements and contributions, but, you know, why did they not do it during Ferguson? Right? So there is a little bit of hypocrisy, but I also want to know from Cindy why now. Many people have different opinions why this is happening right now. So I'm going to make note. Cindy, I want to talk about that. But yeah, so in 2014, no public responses from Amazon. Apple, just Tim Cook made this. And then, you know, and he basically just tweeted twice about Minneapolis. And then Tim Cook shared a tweet about Pope Francis on the day of Michael Brown's death. So we could see that disparity. And then one of the interesting stories, in case you missed it, which I think is really interesting, you know, big tech pre-corona has been getting a lot of tech lash. And that's going to continue to be a conversation as we lead up to the election, right? Because there have been many regulations. Amazon is taking over the world. We have seen how much power Facebook and the other big tech companies. But, you know, facial recognition, I said 2 years ago that the theme was AI. The big theme of 2019, 2018 was AI in terms of technology. 2019, I said that the big technology everybody was talking about, 5G. And I said in the beginning of this year that facial recognition technology was going to be at the pinnacle of the cultural and business and technology conversation, because we've seen what's happening in China. They have asked all their citizens who buy a cell phone to take a photo of themselves and send it to the government. And now, you know, this has been worked on by many American-based technology companies, and IBM basically just wrote a letter, an open letter that basically said that they're getting out of the facial recognition business because they're wondering if it's, you know, it's bad to society because it's, you know, being used for surveillance, racial profiling. There have been a lot of stories to talk about China, about how they've been using facial recognition technology for the Hong Kong situation, but also their persecution against the Uyghur population, which are the Muslims that live in China. So it's interesting. I would say that this conversation, you know, they've been making statements, they've been making contribution, but this is one thing that I think has really propelled the conversation to positivity. So just to go through consumer stuff, and we know Cindy is going to speak a lot about that stuff, but the theme is bring them down, bring them up. We saw probably one of the most highly profiled CEOs who quit of CrossFit. all these editors in the media business have been, getting, literally resigning, pushed out, or fired. On the flip side, one of the Reddit founders on the board, if you missed it, basically said that he wants to fill his board seat with a Black candidate. That's a good change. Now, this is, I don't know what Cindy or anybody, thinks about, but there have been positive reviews of this since, Vogue has basically did a piece on 10 Black photojournalists and their way of representing the protests. Here they are. Again, don't mind me for not, going through all of them because of time and we want to get right to Cindy. Pop Sugar would do 20 Black-owned jewelry brands. And that's happening right now. Allure basically talked about 41 Black-owned beauty brands to support. Axios, which I think is really interesting because journalists are technically not supposed to protest, are actually allowing the reporters to join all the protests and will give them healthcare if they need it. Now, to counteract that, it's important to listen to Black and brown voices right now. And a friend of mine just introduced me to Lindsay Farrar, who's the editor-in-chief of Crown Magazine. And, in response to all of that, she basically said, so honestly, White Alley, you could keep your Instagram posts and tweets of solidarity. You can keep your blackout days. You don't need your lip service. It'll take more than publishing a few Black-owned business roundups for a couple of weeks, like Allure and Vogue did, until you commit to doing your part in holistically dismantling the countless corrupt, oppressive systems that keep the darkest people all over the world in a figurative and a literal chokehold. The only thing we could possibly say to you is, I can't breathe. I, support this magazine publication. I think it's awesome. Going to the movie business or the media business, I actually started in entertainment. I used to do what I do now for the movie producer Brian Grazer, who's made a lot of films that featured Black actors like Denzel Washington, American Gangster, and many others. He did a film with Spike Lee called Inside Man. I was working with him then, and my job was to do this, to be what he called his cultural attaché. And at that time, the movie studio said, we're not going to make a movie that they would call them Black movies because they don't sell internationally. And Netflix actually just put out the data that When They See Us, the DuVernay's Emmy-winning miniseries about the Central Park 5 case, basically had 51% of the audience out of the United States. American Son was 46% of viewers that were not US subscribers. So they just called the movie business out on their shit. What's been happening is interesting in the entertainment business, right? There's a story from Vulture saying, like, we have this cultural construct of shows even since the 50s and 60s, like think Dragnet or Hill Street Blues, of seeing cops in their most highly redeemed sense of being. And after that, Cops, the show, literally was just canceled yesterday. And the new news that you may have not seen, HBO Max actually just removed Gone with the Wind from their platform. So just last thing about, if you are a consumer, here's a woman that I kind of learned about, Rachel Cargill. And in her, if you look at this link, she actually has templates of all the things that we could actually do. So here's a letter that you can send to your school district. It's right here to keep them accountable. So let me just put that in the chat because, all right, because that's important. Hold on, I don't want to interrupt the flow, but this is important for everybody, I think. But please push back if you don't think. And then we have the brands. This just came out. So we did Blackout Tuesday. Many of the brands are saying donation. So like what's next? Michael Jordan donated $100 million, a lot of other corporations, but what's next? And Cindy, just last week with Nike getting a lot of praise for showing this ad, literally like probably the first brands to basically say this. And Cindy basically said, hey, Nike, don't pretend there's not a problem in America. Not one Black person on your executive leadership team for a company that's made billions out of Black sports people and consumers. Change that. So now we're going to go to the work and how corporations should respond, or I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm having Cindy here, and we're going to have this conversation. I'm really excited. I'm in my stage of learning and unlearning. I, know that I'm a white privileged male. This has been confusing and hard for me, but I'm trying to speak to the right people, not just Cindy. We also had Calvin Baker on last week, and I have a lot of Black and brown friends and people who work with me. And today, Cindy, who is Asian, I'm just going to call that out, is here. And Cindy, if I'm wrong about that, please refer. And so here we go. We are in my favorite section, the Hearts and Minds segment. Cindy Gallop. She is the founder of Make Love Not Porn, where she initially had her TED Talk in 2009, where she has over 2.25 million downloads or views of that talk about the hardcore male porn industry culturally constructing the way that people are supposed to have sex in a very violent and misogynist way. And Cindy, you have done so much since that one moment that I learned about you, and I am so honored that you're here. So I'd love to welcome Cindy Gallop. Hi, Cindy, are you there?
Yep, thank you very much, Brad. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Great, Cindy. So let me just ask, what is your ethnicity?
So my father's English, my mother is Chinese.
Okay, all right, there we have it. Okay, so, and you're clearly not black or brown. So, no. Okay, so let's start with the question that you and I have been talking about, right? My mission with Culture Class, and this was going pre-COVID, is to find other voices. And I showed my curation. I'm kind of connecting the dots. You're seeing how I, what I'm thinking about, and I'm curious, and I'm asking questions. And I've had people from every industry in the last 13 weeks just provide their perspectives on everything. And my big theme has been that coronavirus has been both a magnifier of all the shit that plagued society before, the world being on fire, and now an accelerator to the change we need to have, okay? So, I'm a white man, okay? You're British and you're Chinese, and I've gotten a few emails, I have to say, only from white men who said, I don't understand why you don't have a person of color. Why you're interviewing Cindy, and I think it's inappropriate. And, just to respond to that, I said, well, Cindy has been booked before this whole thing has happened. And I'm not going to push Cindy out because she's a legend. I think it's important to have voices from every ethnicity background to kind of share their feelings. I've shared my feelings and my vulnerability. So what do you have to say to this person?
Sure. So for everybody's information, what Brad is specifically referring to is that this morning, he and I both received an email from Piers Hawkes of PSFK, who...
you're calling him out.
No, absolutely. So Piers is one of the white men that Brad referenced, who had emailed him, just Brad. This morning, Piers emailed Brad and myself, and his email said, I've thought about this more, and I protest that I still don't think you should be running this talk with Cindy. Neither of you are remotely qualified to discuss this subject of racism alone, and your insistence that you can have this discussion smacks of white privilege. Please bring on another person of color or two. And I want to share with this audience, but before Brad and I get into this conversation, the email I wrote in response to Piers that Brad was copied on, because I actually think it's very important that every person listening to us now hears what I said to Piers. Piers, 2 responses to your email. Number 1, every single person of whatever color, especially white, should be talking about how to end racism in every single conversation. There should be no other topic right now in any forum, both public and private, whether professional or personal. It is the responsibility of every single person in this nation, and gratifyingly, as we have seen all around the world, especially every single white person should be speaking right now about what they are doing personally to end racism in their own sphere of professional and personal operation. I'm assuming from your note that you're not aware that I'm not white. I'm half Chinese and have encountered racism myself. It was the defining theme of my childhood growing up in Asia, where to the whites I wasn't white and to the Chinese I wasn't Chinese. Regardless of that, my point above stands. Every single white person should be talking about how to end racism and the personal role that they plan to play in that and are playing in that every chance they get. Every speaker should be talking about that and no other topic. This is especially the case because, point number 2, Black people are exhausted with having
Cindy,
to be...
before you say that, Cindy, before you say that,
Yep.
right before, I just want to make everybody aware, which I wanted to talk about, is that before this conversation, there was a lot of talk about racism in terms of the Asian American and anybody from Asian descent. Not just here. I mean, there were reports about white people spitting on Asian Americans, right? And this is from 3620, where there was an organization that basically had, this is before you could see social distancing and masks and staying at home. This organization basically were passing out hand sanitizer to say, stop the spread of racism. Now, this isn't racism against Black and brown people. It's racism against Chinese, mainly because of our president calling it the Wuhan virus. So I just wanted to put that out there that there, like you said, I appreciate what you just said. So I'm gonna, please continue.
So going back, the second point I made to Piers in response to his email was, Black people are exhausted with having to be the ones to talk about racism, bring up racism, or all too frequently in both corporate and social settings, not bring it up so as not to make white people uncomfortable, and having to educate white people about racism. Black people have said this repeatedly, all over social media, in blog posts, in articles. My Black friends and the Black people I follow on social have said this again and again. It's not our role to educate white people. It's not our role to take all those earnest, please tell me about it conversations, especially for free. Black people are quite rightly now demanding to be paid for diversity and racism advice, education, counseling, speaking. Black people want to see white people step up. Black people are calling out all over social, all over Medium, all over every publication for white people and white allies to take up the fight instead of them. They are saying how completely exhausted they are and how fed up they are with having to be the ones to talk about racism and fight the racism battle. Not least because of all the energy, all the creativity, all of the talent they would like to be expending on their chosen pursuits and professions instead, that racism currently keeps them from progressing in. As someone said on Twitter the other day, don't you think James Baldwin and a ton of other Black creators and artists would have loved to have used all of their creative energies and talents on expressing things other than fighting racial injustice? It is the responsibility of every single non-Black person right now to talk publicly and privately about how to end racism and about their personal role in ensuring that happens. There should be no other topic being talked about in any forum. All the best, Cindy. So that's the email that I wrote in
That was
response.
the email.
That's the email I sent to Piers Fawkes in response. That is why I am very keen to talk with Brad today about how to end racism in the corporate world.
And what about using the word end? Like, is that possible? Or could we say how to limit, how to...
No, we have to eradicate racism, and it is entirely possible. So
tell us, what do you think?
Yeah. So everybody, I'm a big fan of radical simplicity. I'm all about keeping things really simple. For the corporate world, how you end racism is incredibly simple. Hire, welcome, and promote Black talent. That's it. And I'm going to talk through exactly what I mean by that.
Please.
But let me tell you why I say that just doing that will drive enormous change. Because first of all, when you hire and welcome and promote Black talent, you pay Black talent. You begin equalizing the massive pay and wealth gap that is driven by racism. Simply hiring and promoting Black talent, meaning that they get to make the money white talent has for centuries, begins channeling wealth to Black households and Black families and begins building the Black economy and equalizing the economy as a whole. That's incredibly important. That alone starts driving enormous change. Then when you hire and promote Black talent, you are then role modeling Black talent and Black professionals in every possible place and at every possible level that they need to be seen to prevent the appalling racist assumption in every company that if there is a Black person in the room, they are the coffee lady or the janitor or the cleaning person. Happens to Black colleagues all the time. Thirdly, when you hire and promote Black talent, you enable the Black lens to be brought on innovation, on disruption in every single business. And I mean, just to give you one example alone, my industry, advertising. When you have Black leadership, Black creative directors, Black creatives creating advertising, which is an enormously powerful force in popular culture when it comes to shaping societal attitudes and behavior. When you have the Black lens creating advertising, directing advertising, casting advertising, producing advertising, you get a lens that begins reflecting in advertising the world as it really is. And that too role models and shapes how society regards, behaves around, behaves towards Black people.
Agreed.
So those are just a few of the reasons why. It's very simple. Hire, welcome, and promote Black talent. And by the way, the welcome part of that is incredibly important. I'm going to come back to that later on in this discussion and tell you exactly what I mean by that. Now, something that I really want to address in this conversation is the truly appalling and unbelievably insulting response that is all too often made, all too frequently when this is said, very simply, hire, welcome, and promote Black talent. And this response, articulated in many ways, goes something along the lines of, oh, you know, diversity is great, but we can't lower the bar. Forgive me for saying this really, really emphatically, because this is how I like to say it, but diversity raises the fucking bar. The bar is set so low right now when the bar is defined by white men. We have not even begun to see how high the bar can be set in every industry when that bar is set by Black talent, colored talent, female talent, LGBTQ talent, disabled talent, etc., etc. So bear that in mind. If anybody attempts that one with any of you, diversity raises the bar. It doesn't lower it. And
it's interesting that you use the example of having Black leaders in advertising. I mean, I think I learned this from you, but I also studied cultural media studies in college, Brown. But it taught me how the media shapes everything we are. It's a cultural construct. But even men, like you saw in Mad Men, like, why are men making car commercials for women? Like, they have no idea. Right? So is it kind of the same theory in a sense?
No, it totally is. I mean, everything I'm going to say to you today about how we end racism in the corporate world is also how we end sexism, when you say it about women, is how we end Ageism, when you say about older people, is how we end homophobia. When you say it about LGBTQ, is how we end ableism. When you do all of this as it relates to disabled people. So all of the principles I'm talking about, and I do want to keep the focus on racism right now, very specifically, but everything I say to you about how to end racism is also how we end every other ism.
Which is why you're a great voice for us all to hear.
Yeah.
Because it is a similar, I mean,
Yeah.
although it's a different thing, like you said, it's a similar process.
Yeah,
right?
And I want to very specifically tackle in this conversation a number of the apparent solutions you will hear companies articulate that are not the things they should be doing. So, you know, one response that we see a lot of is, we absolutely want more Black talent in our company. So it's all about solving what is obviously a pipeline problem. So we must make sure we have diverse internships. We're going to make sure that we absolutely have diversity at our entry-level positions. It does not matter how many Black people you bring in at the bottom if you show them nowhere to go at the top. And so my message to white leaders and managers in every industry is hire into equal power with you brilliant Black women and men that you feel threatened by. And literally, that is how you think about that action point. Hire into equal management power with you brilliant Black women and men that you feel threatened by. Because it's only when we have full Black representation in leadership that then again drives change within the whole of the company without you even then having to think about, oh, diverse interns, diverse entry-level positions, because trust me, with full Black representation at the senior levels, that will happen. And one very important point to make as well, because here's another point of pushback. Oh, you know, we really wanted senior Black leaders, we just couldn't find any. Of course you couldn't find any, because you weren't looking hard enough, and we will come on to that a bit, because there are a number of other barriers that militate against that. But the point I particularly want to highlight here is another action point for when you commit to hiring senior Black leaders. And that is to hire into leadership brilliant Black talent based on potential, not proof. Which, by the way, is what happens to white men all the time. White men get hired and promoted on potential, not proof. They get hired and promoted because senior white male leadership go, oh, he reminds me of myself at his age. I can see myself in him.
Yeah.
He's great to have a beer with. We reckon he can do it. With someone who is other, and again, this applies to a Black person, it also applies to a woman, it's a whole different set of criteria. Well, have they done this job before? Have they done it long enough? Have they done it well enough? So when you set out to hire senior Black leadership, hire for potential, not proof. Because that brilliant Black talent will never have been given the opportunity to occupy those positions. And so I want to recommend that this is exactly the advice I gave. I was consulting with somebody just a few months back, pre-pandemic, because this was for a very big business in the hospitality industry. And I'm going to give you various examples of real world conversations, folks. I'm not going to name names or companies with any of these. But, you know, a senior man reached out to me. He sent me a wonderful email. He had all the right thinking. He said, the hospitality industry is dominated by men. You know, I want to hire women into leadership throughout our group. So I, you know, sat down with him. And he said, you know, Cindy, I've got a real problem because I've briefed our recruiters on the fact that I want, you know, female managers in this particular area of hospitality. And obviously they have to be managers because they have to be operating at a certain level. And I'm getting virtually no female candidates. And I said, that's because you're giving your recruiter the wrong brief. Don't say, I want female managers. Say to them, I want female number 2s and number 3s. And I said, the reason we want to do that is because if you stick to managers, there are very few female managers in your industry because they've all been either forced out by sexual harassment. By the way, this area of hospitality is known for it. They have been kept down by insecure men who felt threatened by them. They've been retaliated against when they protested sexual harassment. I said, tell your recruiter to only bring you to interview female number 2s and number 3s coming up through the ranks, because I guarantee you, when you hire them into managerial positions, they will do a far better job than any of the white male managerial candidates you're looking at right now. Mm-hmm. And it's very important when I make this point to make you all aware, for those of you who are not already aware. So 7 years ago, my friend Thomas Premuzic wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review that is the single most read Harvard Business Review article of all time. It's called, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? And in this article, Thomas makes the point that we all focus, quite rightly, on the many barriers in business that impede the progress of brilliant women. He said a far bigger problem is the lack of obstacles for incompetent men. This is the most read Harvard Business Review article of all time, so much so that Thomas, a couple of years ago, turned this article into a book. The book is also called, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? Please go and buy it immediately. I blurbed it and I said on the cover, this is the single most important business leadership of our time, because it is. But I'm making this point now in telling you to end racism by hiring into leadership in your companies brilliant Black men and women who have not done that job before. Because I guarantee you, those brilliant black number 2s, number 3s will do a far better job than any white male leader you have in your company at the moment. So that's the reason.
And why do you say that?
Because they've been kept down. White men get hired on potential, not proof. Everyone else gets hired and promoted on proof, not potential, and not even then. Okay, read Thomas's book, Brad. Why do so many incompetent men become leaders? It'll tell you all you need to know in answer to that question. Okay. Then I want to talk about some other things you need to do to make sure that you genuinely, after committing to it, hire, welcome, and promote brilliant Black talent. So a few months ago, somebody very senior in a global company with hugely well-known brands, and this is a very well-known global senior leader who's male, asked to consult with me. And what he said to me, and by the way, this is a call I get a lot. He said, Cindy, we have this open global position. It's a crucial position for one of our brands. And I really want to hire a Black woman into this position. Who do you know? Okay, I get this call all the time. I get some variant of, Cindy, I really want to do the right thing. I want to hire a Black woman into this position, or a Black man, who do you know? So I said, it's not as simple as that. There are a number of things that you need to do first. I said, I applaud the goal. Here's what you need to do, because that they had reached out to book me, having told me what they want to talk about. And so I've had the chance to research how they're approaching it. I said, first of all, you have written the job description for this role in a way that is designed to appeal to white men. And if you look at where you posted it on LinkedIn, in the comments thread is a massive demonstration of how much that is the case, because that comments thread is full of white men either recommending other white men for that job or putting themselves forward. And so I literally took him through the job description. And so, by the way, if you commit to hiring and welcoming, promoting Black talent, look at your job spec. So I said to him, for example, and again, I'm not going to get too specific because there was something specific to this role that had been very wrong-headedly written. But one of them was the point I've just made. This job description said, and it said, as these job descriptions tend to, you, the right person, will have all of this. Boom, 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 laundry list. One of which was, you will have a creative track record in our industry that makes all of us jealous. I said to him, no, they won't. No. If you are a black woman or a black man in our industry, you don't have a creative track record that makes the rest of us jealous because you were never allowed to. You never got those promotions. You never got hired in the first place. You were passed over, you were overlooked, you were forced out of the company, you're stuck in middle management. You need to rewrite that point to say something along the lines of, this is your opportunity to demonstrate all of the creativity you have found stifled somewhere else. For example, I gave him a number of ways in which to reword this. Then I said, it's not just about the job description. You need to completely redesign your interview process because systemic, institutional,
right. I want to get
unconscious and conscious, by the way, because we give too much credit. We talk about unconscious racism when a lot of it is actually conscious racism. Systemic institutionalized racism is built into every single interviewing process. When companies interview white men, and most of those interviewers are white men, they're looking for reasons to hire that white man. When white men interview women, black people, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled, they are looking for reasons not to hire us. And so I said, you have to completely redesign the process by which you interview in order to be able to welcome in and actually have a chance of hiring black talent versus having it be put off from the moment it steps across the first interviewer's threshold and encounters blatant institutional racism.
Wow.
Secondly, sorry, Brad.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So before this, even before Corona, before protests, many companies have like a D&I executive, diversity and inclusion. And I've heard from a lot of conversation with friends who are white, who run divisions, and they're like, yeah, I just spoke to my D&I person. They have $100 million. They're going to send it. What is your feeling about the D&I part of a company? And should it still exist? What should it be? And where should it go?
Yeah. So personally, it absolutely shouldn't exist at all. It shouldn't need to. D&I should be integrated into the DNA of the company. But here's a very practical reason why it shouldn't exist, Brad.
Yes.
Because there is a fundamental aspect of human psychology where we feel that if we are doing something good in one place, it gives us license to do something bad in another. The very mundane, everyday example of this is I just had a Diet Coke, so now I can eat the chips, okay? So what happens when a company prides itself on a chief diversity officer, diversity initiatives, and it talks about all of that a lot, and it has a budget, is people go, great, diversity inclusion is being taken care of over there, so I can carry on behaving exactly the way I always have. Nothing changes, okay? That's why I don't believe in having D&I as a
What do you have to say about many of the D&I executives are black or brown people?
I can tell you, I'm going to speak for those black and brown people. They are all sick to death of being hired as chief diversity officers. They want to be the CMO. They want to be the CEO. They want to be the CSO. They don't want to be the fucking chief diversity officer. And forgive me, guys, for those of you who didn't know me in advance, I'm going to drop F-bombs because that is how strongly I feel about this. And you're obviously free to exit this Zoom or to put your hands over your ears, okay?
Wait, before you go, Cindy, because we have 10, do you have time to keep going? I mean,
but I have 3 more points.
Okay.
I want to make very quickly, if that's okay.
Okay.
I want to just complete the point I was making, which was it starts further back in your interview process, okay? If you are a white man saying to me, oh, we want to hire a black woman into this very senior role, and black female candidates look at your company and see an entire division that is full of white men, they are going, why the fuck would I want to put myself in there? I know exactly what's going to happen. you did not redesign your company to welcome in Black talent. And so it starts further back. And it literally starts with, how can we actually already within our company promote, elevate, bring in more of our own Black talent, so that when we want to hire Black talent from the outside, they don't take one look at a sea of white male faces and go, why the fuck would I want to put myself in there? Two more points. In all of this, when you hire, welcome in, and promote Black talent, lead with the least represented segment, which is Black women. Everything about this is intersectional, okay? Lead with older Black women, because, oh my God, the sheer pool of talent and brilliance and experience and expertise there that is not being tapped, that is finding it hardest to progress in the workforce. Oh my God, find older Black women and hire them and promote them. And then the last thing I want to say is, while you're doing all this, what do you say to your white employees? And this is really important, by the way, because a lot of white people, men and women, get very unhappy because they don't realize this is not a zero-sum game. You know, it's not, if there's more for the rest of us, there's less for you. This is not pie. More for us means more for all of you. And so every single CEO, every leader, when they openly commit to hiring, welcoming, and promoting Black talent, should say to all of their employees, and you've been hearing this word a lot, we are not racist, we are anti-racist. And anybody in this company who does not equally subscribe to being anti-racist should leave now. That is literally the message that should be given. If you don't buy into all of this, go somewhere else. And that applies equally to white leadership that doesn't really believe this either. That should be the message of the person at the top of the company, because Black talent cannot thrive when white talent is sabotaging it on a daily basis with microaggressions, with all sorts of things that Black talent has been putting up with for far too long. So anybody in the whole of the company doesn't subscribe and equally commit to this should feel free to go elsewhere. That's the message from the top.
Okay. I actually spoke to somebody who is a Black woman, created an organization called Platform that provides funding for Black entrepreneurs, Black and brown entrepreneurs. And she said that because of systemic racism, and maybe you could explain to everybody what it is, we are all racist because we are constructed unconsciously or consciously of the way that our culture was built 400 years ago. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, absolutely. We are all racist. I'm racist. I am racist in ways that will absolutely manifest unconsciously, despite all of the conscious efforts that I make not to be. It is an absolute integration of systemic socio-cultural dynamics. And that is why our game plan has to be to end racism in every sphere where we are able to operate our personal professional power to do so. And that is across, we talked about the corporate world. I said at the start of this conversation, when you are a company that operates in popular culture, by ending racism within your company, you bring a lens to bear on your popular culture output that begins role model and showcasing and designing racism out of the media, that in turn will help end it in everybody's attitudes and behavior. You cannot have too many people tackling this from every possible angle, in every possible area, because it is woven into the very fabric of society. It is woven into all of us. And that is why we all need to be acknowledging it. And we all need to be doing what we can to tackle it. To bring this full circle back to Piers Hawkes' email, and to what I said to him, nobody should be having any other conversation or any other goal right now. Seriously.
Yeah, and he basically said that, I invited him to talk to us about it. He's like, I have, a better thing to do by going to my retail and having like important people or the right people to have this conversation.
I have to tell you, sorry, that is the definition of white privilege. Thinking you can stay out of this conversation, that you don't have this conversation, that the burden of having this conversation falls only on Black and brown people. That is white privilege.
And is there hope?
Oh my God. No, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
It's so interesting. What we are seeing with this global Black Lives Matter movement is exactly what we were seeing just a short while ago with the pandemic. And this is a really, really hopeful point, folks. Time no longer works the way it used to. The pandemic proved to us that all the things we've been told for centuries would take a really long time to do or could not be done because they take so long, when it comes to an emergency, happen overnight. Likewise with Black Lives Matter. Literally, before I came on this call, Ellen Powell, who is brilliant,
Oh yeah.
just tweeted,
She was
isn't it
at
interesting?
Kleiner Perkins. She was at.
She sued Kleiner Perkins. She wrote
Okay.
a brilliant book called Reset, everybody should read. She's the founder of Project Include. She just tweeted, isn't it interesting, all of the things that companies have made happen in the last 2 weeks that they said they could not make it happen over the past so many years. Okay, guys, that is so hopeful. Time works differently now. It takes no time to make the shit happen that for years and years we were told could not happen. That is fan-bloody-tastic.
That's what this whole coronavirus was about. It's a magnifier of all the shit, but an accelerator. Now we're in a world.
Yeah, and the pandemic first, and now Black Lives Matter. And the really brilliant thing also is that in both cases, and this is a unique phenomenon, they're global. The pandemic meant that we were all in lockdown globally. The entire world experienced the same thing simultaneously. Black Lives Matter has moved the world globally. The entire world is now with this movement. The world is never going to be the same again. And that is very, very good news for all of us who are never the status quo to begin with. Because it's only when things break down, this utterly and completely, new models and new ways of doing things emerge that never would have emerged otherwise. Now is our time to make that change happen. But the thing I really want everyone to take away from this conversation is there are two dynamics at play. There is everything the pandemic and Black Lives Matter is making happen as we speak, the breakdown of the old world order. And then on top of that, there is the dynamic of what every single one of us can now seize that opportunity to make happen ourselves, to build the future that we all want to live and work in. And I want to see every one of you listening today seize that opportunity. You know, I'm all too often interviewed and people say, so Cindy, you know, what do you see happening as a result of? What do you think will be? And I always say, you're making the classic mistake of asking that question in the passive tense. All of this changes when you and I and everyone else make it change, and I don't wait for things to change, I make them change. Don't wait for all the changes happening right now. Make change happen yourself on top of that.
And one of the big takeaways, and I'm going to continue to do, you know, we need to hear from everybody how they're feeling. We all have to learn. We all have to unlearn. And like you said, Black and brown executives and leaders, you know, they don't want to be the ones who should just be talking about this subject because, you know, I'm a gay man, even though I'm white and privileged. I've been shaped by, you know, I've gotten bashed a couple times. It is horrible. But like, you know, one of the questions I have for you is because of the pain I had as an other, am I allowed to put that in the conversation right now? Like I had a gay friend and say, you know, just because I'm white, I'm also gay. And I mean, like how?
No, Brad, absolutely. As I said, all of this is intersectional.
Right.
You know, all of this intersects. And so now is the opportunity to absolutely take what motivates you, you know, what fires you up to want to make change happen. Because every one of us coming from our own individual perspectives, cumulatively, everything we're doing adds up to enormous change at scale, at impact for all of this across the board.
Right. Well, it's hashtag Me Too was a perfect example. Now we have Black Lives Matters and what's happening right now. You know, I, as somebody of the gay community, I think it's time for us to speak out too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Wow. Last thing I want to say, you do have a reputation of being really, you know, forceful and sometimes a little bit intense, which could make those white men uncomfortable, which you say is what we need to do, right? And they should embrace that. But You also, I've had a couple, we hung out in Brazil together. Remember we had a
We did
caipirinha?
indeed. We had a wonderful night in Rio, getting drunk on caipirinhas, everybody.
Which will never, which we find, especially now, you know, they're bringing.
Oh my God, yeah.
So I think you told me that like you really have to make change with kindness, right? You don't have.
No, actually, Brad. I mean, all of us have our own approaches, by the way.
Right.
And you know, when I said earlier, we can't have too many of us coming at this from every possible angle.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you guys remember this, but several years ago, when Russia annexed Crimea, there was a group of women who protested topless outside the Crimean parliament. Okay, and I remember looking at those women and thinking, I would never in a million years ever do that, but I'm so happy there are women who will. We can't have too many of us coming at this from our own individual angles, using our own individual approaches. But the one thing I'm saying to everybody right now is, whatever your individual situation, I want you to get angry about it. I want you to get very, very angry. And by the way, I say this especially to women of whatever color, because women are never expected to be angry. You know, I want you to absolutely use that anger to fire you up, because it's when we get angry that we make shit happen. And too often we're told, oh, no, you've got to be nice. You know, tamp that anger down, hide it. You know, honestly, the most stressful thing is having to hide that anger when you are raging about the injustice being done to you, whether you are a black person, whether you're a woman, whether you're gay, whether you're disabled, whether you're older, whatever. Absolutely use that anger to fire you up, to make you do things you might not otherwise do unless you give that anger full rein and allow it to motivate you. You know, I fight a huge number of barriers building a sex tech startup. It's very discouraging. I've been at it for 11 years. And so people say to me, Cindy, what keeps you going? The dynamic that keeps me going is the one I characterize as, I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put an offline path, I'm going to fucking well show you. I have to take all of that demoralization, depression, all of those challenges and obstacles and turn them into motivation, inspiration. And so, you know, tackle this, folks, any way you want to, but feel free to get very, very angry and use that anger to make shit happen.
Howard Beals, a little bit. Network. I want to ask you a question about #MeToo. There were only, in my Zeitguiding, what I do, and you know, being a media omnivore, I saw 2 stories about #MeToo. One, Biden was accused by a woman for sexual harassment, and McDonald's was sued for sexual harassment issues. You know, that was such a movement that was becoming the pinnacle of conversation. There was a lot of good change, right? Do you think coronavirus, because there have been a lot of stories about domestic abuse that are horrific, but do you think that this has put a pause on people's consciousness about what the #MeToo communication? I heard we shouldn't call it a movement. I heard it's more of a communication. Do you think what do you think is the future of that now that everything's going on?
Right. So first of all, Brad,
solved that problem.
Right.
You know?
First of all, Brad, Me Too was not a success. The amount of change Me Too has managed to make happen is minuscule compared to the way that sexual harassment is systemic and institutionalized across every area of business and of society. And those of you in the audience who may not have seen this, please go to YouTube, search Cindy Gallop 3% Conference 2017, find a talk of mine that is called Where the Money Is, and watch the first 15 minutes to see what I mean. I see that one of the audience was there, terrific. And actually, Brad, there is absolutely a future for Me Too, because pandemic or no pandemic, I have to tell you, and by the way, my talk in 2017 was about the Me Too call out I put out to the advertising industry and everything that resulted, which was, I'd known it was bad. I never knew how bad it really was. And so as I say in that talk, I changed my own thinking. For years, I've been saying the single biggest business issue facing advertising in every industry was diversity. Actually, it's not. And even today, it isn't. The single biggest business issue facing every industry is sexual harassment. Because sexual harassment manages women, whether they're black, whether they are white, whether they're of color. Sexual harassment manages women out of every single industry. Sexual harassment destroys women's careers, derails women's ambitions, crushes women's dreams. Sexual harassment keeps out of power and leadership in every industry the female leaders who would ensure that gender equality, diversity, and inclusion actually happened. And so, no, Me Too is as important as ever before. Again, it's not a zero-sum game. You know, Black Lives Matter's rise does not mean Me Too's decline. All of this, as I said, is intersectional. All of this is demonstrative of what happens when the world is ruled by white heteronormative patriarchy. And that's why every single one of us has to break that down, coming at it from our respective scenarios.
And what should be after this call or Zoom call? One of the first.
Oh, sorry? What was that, Brad?
For all of us on this listening to you and hearing your advice and your plan for change, what should we all do instead of sending this video to everybody?
No. Well, all of you should. It's very simply, again, hire, welcome, and promote Black talent. And now I'm saying it to all of you as a broad audience. I mean those terms, each one of them in their broader sense. Hire Black talent. Put brilliant Black people forward for any position you see going. Bring it to their attention. Call it out on social. Welcome. Make it a point to widen your circle of brilliant Black talent you can recommend in any capacity. Follow Black people on social, join conversations, groups, whatever. Promote Black talent. I mean that in the broadest possible sense. Elevate Black voices. Promote Black authored books, Black directed films.
Go to historic Black colleges too.
Hire, welcome, and promote Black talent. And I want to just reference what Brad talked about at the start of this session, because there's too much blackwashing going on at the moment, okay? So, and I'll give you an example of what I mean, because in all of this, it's communication through demonstration. Brad referenced how Vogue had done this roundup of 10 Black photojournalists. Look at these great photos they're taking. Last fall, UK Vogue, which is the only Vogue with a Black editor, Edward Enninful, dedicated an issue to diversity. Whoopee, everyone went apeshit. Edward Enninful edited that issue together with Meghan Markle, okay? And so on the front cover, they put a lineup of Black of color models, and they asked a white, renowned fashion photographer, Peter Lindbergh, to shoot that cover. I tweeted at UK Vogue, at Edinburgh, I said, for the issue of Vogue dedicated to diversity, why would you not give the incredibly coveted cover photo assignment to a Black photographer, and especially a Black female photographer? Why would you not give the thousands of dollars you paid Peter Lindbergh to shoot that cover to a Black female photographer who never gets to make that kind of money? That's communication through demonstration. And by the way, that's blackwashing as well. That's, whoopee, we're all about diversity, but we'll just get it shot by the same old white fashion photographer who's one of the few little elite caucus of white male fashion photographers who've been getting all the fucking money out of the fashion industry for literally decades. Explode that.
But that's exactly what Crown Magazine was saying as well. Like, we just don't.
Yeah, exactly. So in all of this, also pay Black people every opportunity. Pay them for their advice, pay them for their education, Pay them when you hire them. Just pay Black people. Start channeling money into the Black economy.
And it also happens from, I guess the word is bottom up as opposed to top as well. I mean, you know, you can't just have, it has to come from every part of the company. So I have the question of, I've been asked, you know, so what was affirmative action back in the day? And why is it not the right thing? Like when I went to college, like, you know, Brown was accepting so many Black people and brown people. So, you know, how has that been a failure and why?
Right. Okay. That has been a failure because white people did not want to implement it effectively. I am all about affirmative action. Okay. I am all about positive discrimination. I'm all about quotas because change does not happen quick enough without them. And the example I'll give you is, you know, and I've been saying this for years. I hear, and I've been hearing for years from women who go, "Oh, Cindy, but you know, I don't want to get hired just because I'm a woman." And my response is, get over it and look around you at all the mediocre men who got hired just because they were men. Affirmative action has been working for men for years. Affirmative action has been working for white people for years. It's about bloody time we affirmatively action the shit out of racism and sexism and homophobia and ableism and ageism, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I think that's a very poignant last quote. Cindy, I am so grateful that you shared your time and your insights. I just wanted to give everybody your information, Cindy Gallop, at Cindy Gallop or cindygallop.com. And for all of you who are part of Culture Class, next week is going to be our 14th, but the third one for our summer semester. And, you know, we're going to have Kate Beyer, who is a psychiatrist and a psychopharmacologist. And she's going to be talking about racism in the biochemical and, you know, the way that we should speak it on like on a brain and mood level, dovetailed with the coronavirus. And oh, I put you here too. So and again, you know, we had a different model after the free classes. I was charging for after the free classes, I had a fee for the summer semester. I changed it as pay as you can, and we're giving, you know, 15% to the Zeitguest, in this case Cindy Gallop's choice. And it's really for her organization, Make Love Not Porn, so she could keep fighting all of this. And it was because like people wanted to donate for you, right, Cindy? And like
yeah. And by the way, I should explain, folks, for those who don't know, Make Love Not Porn is a for-profit business, but we fight a huge series of battles no other companies do. Every piece of business infrastructure other tech startups take for granted, we can't. The small print always says no adult content. And so our members and various people asked us to actually offer a donation function for anybody who wants to support the social sex revolution. And so if you've liked everything I've said today, I would love it if you would, you know, be willing either to, you know, donate, Brad sent you the link, or join Make Love Not Porn, sign up and subscribe. It starts at $10 a month. You know, anything you can do to support us as we fight to bring enormous social benefit to the world by changing the way the world has sex for the better, I would be enormously grateful for your support for my own startup.
Of course, thank you. And yeah, we could use it too. It's like a Culture Class. I love what I do. I'm so grateful that, you know, I have the opportunity to have these conversations with Cindy and some other people from all industries. And I also love sharing like my connection of the dots while you're doing your real jobs and I'm reading while you're changing the world and changing your corporations and making them not racist for the future. So I'll leave you all with a huge thank you. I hope to see you next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Cindy, I hope one day we could go to Brazil.
Absolutely. One day we'll be back on Ipanema Beach drinking caipirinhas, all of us. Take care, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much.
Bye.